All right, Jay, you're all set.
Are we bringing the graphic down, Todd?
There you go.
Look at you. I would like to call the Budget Appropriations meeting to order at 6 p.m. Before we get going, I do want to make sure that I recognize Todd Kobus for running the broadcast as well as the Zoom meeting tonight. Tonight we'll have police, wastewater, and the school department on. So do we have Chief Agnew on?
We do. 1 second for me to promote him. Oh.
Whoops.
There you go, Chief Agnew. You should be. Chief, you're unmuted.
Unmuted?
Yes. Yep.
Hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Chief. How are you?
Good, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you. So we're going to do the same thing that we've done for the past 3 years. We're going to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your budget, what your needs are, and then we'll open it up to the council and Deb for any questions, concerns they have. So, Chief, take it away.
I lost you. Hold on. All right. Well, good evening. As you very well know, this has been a very unusual budget year with the COVID-19. So let me just first preference this budget. It's not like budgets in the past. These accounts, a lot of them, their intended purpose for spending could not be spent this year because of COVID. Basically from February on, it got a little interesting. In March, a lot of these accounts couldn't be spent for what their intended purposes were. And also the warning of, COVID-19's accounts being set up and money being provided from the feds and in the state from FEMA with the Stafford Act and everything else, spending money out of that account prior to the regular budget. So one of the major accounts was training. From February to June, all the training was canceled. That was unfortunate. It's going to cost dividends in the future. We're going to have to make up that training somehow. But having those funds available, we were able to repurpose those funds to help offset the cost of fixing the radio system when the lightning strike happened. So that budget request was offset that I sent to the council because we were able to capture funds inside the police department budget to help support those funds. So that's an example of kind of like the craziness involved. Another line item I could think of was the professional training. That's the FTO stipend. They closed the academies. Kids couldn't graduate. They have to go back to the academies when the academies are open. Therefore, that stipend couldn't be used for the FTO training. Why? We didn't have FTO training. So you're going to see some accounts that weren't spent down, and you're probably like, well, he doesn't need those funds. We need those funds. I didn't needlessly spend money. I was frugal about it because of COVID, understanding that this quarter's revenue might be suspect on the money that we take in from the city. So I took a wait and see attitude. If there was money there in the accounts at the end of the year, Deb sweeps them. They go to free cash. They could be repurposed by the city next year. I didn't want to spend for needlessly spending because I didn't know what the revenue outlook would be. So I say that because a lot of these accounts are also attached to contracts, maintenance of software, maintenance of agreement, technology contracts, also the big one of all, the union contracts. So when you look at this budget and you might see percentages not spent, it's a very unusual budget year because of COVID-19. So most of these accounts are level funded. Many of the accounts that were not level funded were tied to a contract, such as percent raises, increases, stipends, and what have you. There's nothing sexy about this budget. It's almost the exact same budget as last year. I think the difference between last year's budget and this budget may be $50,000. I could be wrong, but we had some officers retire. They retired at top step. They come on, and the new officers come on at bottom step. Therefore, the city enjoys a the word.
Savings.
A savings. Thanks, Deb. Always there. Thanks. I don't know, I feel like the Brady Bunch.
It's a little awkward at first, a little awkward.
Nevertheless, so going down through the budget, my first budget year with bifocals, I think. Getting old. So as we can see that the salaries tied to the contract, the part-time salary account is a lot of that is driven from the cell attendants. When COVID happened, things happened also. Courts closed, and the number of arrests went down. We limited contact from the offices to the citizens, the public. We purposely summons instead of arrest to limit the number of contacts coming into the station at booking, fingerprinting. So we avoided a lot of close contact. That's why we're going to see funds left over in the court account. Court was closed, therefore we don't have overtime for court. The detective overtime did spike a little bit because of we had some serious investigations. We had 2 infant deaths recently that drove up a lot of funds in overtime investigating those tragic deaths, and some other high intensity crimes that are still ongoing that are under investigation that's driving up some overtime there. Nothing else crazy. As I said, court time, the professional stipend, FTO stipend couldn't be expended because the academy's closed and the kids could not have graduated the academy. You can see the earned time payment account, 15515,075. We had a lot of retirements this year. People hit 32 years. We're going to have guaranteed 3 retirements coming up this year also. So we're expending some funds out of there. The education and training account, that is used to backfill. That's the 517-910. That's to backfill the overtime to send the guys to the mandatory 4-hour by Massachusetts law in-service training. The academy is closed at the end of February, early March. Couldn't spend the money out of there. There was no need to use the overtime. If the academies are closed, you couldn't send them to training. Therefore, that's going to compound this year with the fall. They'll run accelerated weeks of training, trying to catch up for those officers that missed the second half in-service training this year. That's mandated 40 hours by state law. All the other stipends, the personnel section, are tied to a contract. So any questions on personnel section?
Deb, I saw your hand go up. And then,
If Councilor Kobus wants to go first, I wanted to just get one point of clarification, not so much on the next. Chief, I understand about this year's budget and how things could not be used. The 40-hour mandatory minimum training that you just referred to, is that per calendar year?
That is for fiscal year. So it starts somewhere at the end of September, early October. We send them to SSPI in Foxborough. That's a state-run affiliated academy. There's weeks from October to December, break for Christmas, and then the holidays. And then it starts back up in January, goes all the way sometimes to June or May, depending on how many officers need to be trained.
But the 40 hours that you weren't able to have your officers do this year, they're going to have to increase the amount of training next year?
Maybe, maybe not. What I'm doing is working on, now that things are kind of loosening up and relaxing, I'm trying to go to online training. So those officers who need to catch up on the 40 hours, the state has authorized the chiefs to conduct the online training in lieu of going to the academies. That's one thing I'm trying to do. That's a personnel issue because we still have to put the cruisers out on the road. They still have to be paid overtime according to the contract. So I'd rather get it done prior to the end of this fiscal year. My staff is working on it. What we can do, hopefully, is if not, we'll work on it throughout the summer and the new fiscal year and just be very conservative and overtime through that period and be creative.
Okay, thank you. I only asked because it looked like you're level funded. So if you had double the training next year, you don't have double the money.
Yeah, I understand that. And this council's always been willing to work with me regarding coming back and asking for money. I only ask when I need, and I try to be creative and think outside the box all the time. I only come and ask this council for things that that I haven't tried first and trying to
Okay.
fund within my own budget. So I understand what you're saying, Deb, but I'm pretty confident that that I can, if it's online training, maybe we can do it on duty
Okay.
while they're working and still have adequate coverage for the street. So some outside the box thinking, but I appreciate that.
Counselor Corbus.
Thank you, Councilor Delissio. Chief, welcome. And I have a few questions, but I'll keep it to the personnel section for now. And actually, there was just one question about this section, and that's with the military leave service. I see that dropped down to 10,000. There was 34,000 last year. Do we have less people serving now? Were there people that were called up for COVID-19 that we had to cover for? Can you talk a little bit about that 10,000 number?
I think that 10,000 number, I'm not sure if that was a keystroke error or whatever. We backfill that account via the full-time personnel expense. So full-time salary gets dropped into that account. That account is usually not funded. It's usually funded from the personnel section. We have a member that's activated full-time. That person's not coming back for another 2 years. So those funds are going to be used to pay her salary anyway. So we usually transfer those funds that are up in full-time salary down to full-time military.
Okay. So that 10,000.
Does it belong there?
So which
Yeah, it's a, what is it? Shepard's error, whatever it's called. It's it was keystroked in there. That money's going to be spent on full-time salary anyway, if not reappropriated to a full-time account. I mean, we gotta pay for her salary anyway. She's not coming back for 2 more years.
May I ask, is the patrolman that is away on military leave in your salary sheet and fully budgeted in the salary line?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the council could cut that $10,000 if they want to take it.
Okay.
It's already funded in the full-time salary.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions at this point for the chief? Laura Dolan.
I just had a question on line 513021. Is that, it says dispatch O, is that overtime?
I'm sorry, where are you? What number? 51 what?
513021.
Yeah.
That's dispatcher overtime.
Yeah.
So that captures all dispatcher overtime, including the Fair Labor Standards Act overtime mandatory by federal law.
So why is the amount recommended more than the amount requested?
Probably because they looked at previous years, and I was told to level fund my budget. I level funded my budget. So they probably took an account and said, you know what, I'm always transferring money in there anyway. Might as well fund it. So, you know, if I had the option to fund my budget appropriately, I would. I can't. I'm following orders. Paramilitary.
So would that be the same on line 515075 as well?
515, what's the name on that account?
Earned time?
Earned time is retirement, so that's a projection.
Okay.
How many people we're gonna have retire. So last year, I think we had 4 or 5. This year, we're gonna have 3 that we know of. If a person like I have 2 other guys that one bad day, they can come in and just go see Leslie Ring and retire. They hit 32 years of service. They can retire anytime they want. Some choose not to because of a bad divorce and their wife gets half their pension or whatever, and they want to stick around. It happens. But one bad day, they can come in and retire. That's their right. They've earned that right.
Sure. No, and I was just asking because you don't typically see the amount recommended more than the amount requested.
Yeah, and that was probably an afterthought of, I don't know, Jeremy, you want to say something?
Yeah, to both of those. So after moving stuff around either in the police budget or otherwise, there were some funds or some individual lines that, having conversations with both the mayor and department heads, we knew needed to go up. The dispatcher overtime in fire as well as police. So we took what was kind of available for allocation, saw which accounts we knew would be overspent or thought would be overspent, and then kind of prorated and split out. So that's why it's kind of odd numbers too. It's not nice round numbers because we were taking a kind of a proration across accounts that had need.
Okay, so it's basically when you're going through it, it's discretionary for what you project.
Yeah, the projection on the earn time is exactly what the chief said. It's based upon retirements, but after a couple of conversations, we're like, if we have a little bit more money here, we think we're going to end up spending more than the level funded or more than the requested amount. So let's put it in there and be proactive about the process.
Okay, thank you.
Laura, just to add to that, I probably don't have enough money in there, and I'm going to have to go back and ask the council because of the contract says they earn a certain amount of buyback from the vacation, sick, and comp time. So if somebody doesn't tell me 1 year prior to the fiscal year preparing this budget that they're retiring,
Right.
I can't adequately project what number I'm going to need. We do it with, hopefully things, they'll come forward and say, Chief, I'm going to retire the next fiscal year. I can, if they tell me before January, I get the budget prepared, it's in there, it's accurate. But if they have a family emergency or a job offer or a bad day and they say, hey, I can retire, I'm out of here. Oh, by the way, I want my earned time buyout. That may not be funded in this line. So then therefore I have to have that conversation with the mayor and ask the council for the money and stuff.
Yep.
Sometimes I can capture the money elsewhere in my budget. Like say also if that person retires and their salary is funded for the entire year, I can capture that money, move that money back into move that money into earned time and help offset that cost. It doesn't usually pay 100% of the buyout, but it helps.
Right. I got it. Thank you.
So Chief, I think you do a nice job and we're seeing it here. You historically, since I've known you, you've been able to get pretty close to, thinking who's going to retire and when, but like you said, it could be that one bad day, could be unforeseen medical things. So I think that your awareness and wherewithal of the budget and what's what, where, when is really kind of unique. And you certainly do think outside the box.
The floss is definitely turned off. 32 years ago, they did the same thing. They had a massive retirement, massive hiring. 32 years later, the guy's about to go. We have a very young department now.
Right.
Extremely young. A majority of these guys are under 12, 11, 10 years-ish.
Right.
That's not a lot of time of fighting crime.
No. And look, I mean, I remember years where, and, I know Peter and I have gone to a lot of the retirement ceremonies and, they're not quite as frequent as they were 10 years ago, and it's cyclical.
Right.
So,
Right. I mean, when a person, Jay, you work in the industry and a person reaches their retirement, last thing they want to do is come in for 20% of the dollar.
Right.
No, they reach their 80%. They want to retire. I mean, they did their work. They want to go enjoy Florida and what have you, and not have to shovel snow.
Exactly. Council Waterman, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Good evening, Chief.
Sir, how are you?
I'm fine. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but are the police department going to be taking advantage of the new position with MIS? Should that be funded?
I support that 122%. And I'm asking the city council to support that. I understand that some worry about budget shortfalls and projections and everything else. I have guaranteed, first, I just, Mayor, for recognizing the fire chiefs and my concern regarding this issue. This has been going on since I've been a chief before that.
Okay.
And I thank you for bringing it up, sir. The mayor recognized our concern. And it is a safety concern. Yes, absolutely 100% safety. In 2001, that MIS department in City Hall had 3 staff working in that department. 3. The library even had an MIS person, IT person working in the library. The police department had their own IT person handling these computers in the PD. 2020, we have 2 people to handle the entire city side. We have a lot more computers now in this city than 2001. Why did we go backwards? Why? We can't, MIS does a great job. Bill Leonard runs a very, very, very good shop. However, it's only a two-man person. There's two men in that department.
Right.
We have issues in this PD that aren't being addressed, and it's not because he's not addressing them. He's got other city needs too. Even though I understand he makes police a priority when he can, he needs help. We need help drastically. These officers need help. And I encourage you to go speak to them. Go talk to them about how they can't connect to computers, how their network constantly goes down in the cruiser, how the detectives can't get into a database. We just spent $50,000 on computers in this building.
Yeah.
What are we just going to let them not be maintained? We have over 10 servers in this building. I guarantee that right now, it's probably over 200 days since they've been updated. Why? He's got other things he's got to do too. City Hall, library, water, wastewater. We need that position. We absolutely need that position.
You see it as about a 50-50 sharing with the fire department?
I'm going to tell you, I probably steal more time than him. I love the fire chief. I get along with him great. However, our priority needs a little different than his. I think we have more computers than him. Tied between you and I, it's 50-50, right? But we have some big issues here that we need addressed ASAP here. And Bill's trying. He's trying to do his best, but he can't get to everything. And things are falling through the crack here. I have three. I tell you what, to alleviate some councilors' fears, all right? I understand the mayor is repurposing these funds. These aren't new funds. There was a City Hall employee that retired. He's taken those funds and reallocating these funds to the position. And it's my understanding he's actually saving $10,000 in the process. All right. I understand the city councilors that are saying, hey, we can't so-called add this new position, even though I think it's a repurposing of funds, because we don't know what the outlook is. Where are we going to be in a month, 2 months, 4 months, 5 months? I'll make a commitment to the city council tonight, right now. I have 3 officers retiring. I guaranteed, already told, all set. If there is a budget shortfall, I feel so strongly about this position, I'd be willing to delay backfilling one of those officers to help fund this position should we need to. All right, that's my commitment to this council. That's how much that these officers need our support. What we do, we're almost 100% paperless. Everything we do is computers. I constantly get repair slips for computers, networks, connectivity. The cameras went down. Waiting for to get on here, the cameras went down twice. I got a phone call from downstairs. The cameras went down twice. So is there a need? Yes. Should have been addressed years ago? Absolutely. When is the right time? There never is a right time. But I'm telling you, I will help. If you help me, I help you. If there's a budget shortfall, I'd be willing to delay that position to help fund this and secure this position to avoid a layoff.
Chief, thank you for that explanation. And one thing I'll add to that is in these times, I'm fundamentally against adding a position. However, what I will say as one who is a former police commissioner, one who has gone on a ride along, one who has seen the importance of that network working in a police cruiser, because what a lot of people might not realize is it's not just over the air CB to dispatch. It's a lot of the stuff they're doing. There's a laptop in the front of the cruiser. If you haven't been on a ride along, you don't realize the impact of it. And Chief, I applaud you when you're willing to put your own money in order to fill this important position. I think when it comes to public safety, I'd hate to see a situation where you have a cruiser going down the main strip after a suspect who could be a dangerous suspect. All of a sudden, the internet goes down or the network service goes down, and we have to wait till Bill Lennox to come and fix it or something else. Bill Lennox is out straight.
You're 100% right, Counsel. You're 100% right. What about the lost child? When we push that picture out and we're looking for a lost child, an Alzheimer's patient, we have no connectivity. What about when we're off with a suspect, we go to run that person and the computer's down, right? It stacks. Also the detectives. I encourage you to reach out to Keith Golden. He's the computer crimes detective. He's the subject matter expert. I'm passionate about it. You probably hear it in my voice on how important this is, right? And I'm asking for the council's support. I've asked for the mayor's support. He's recognized it. The other 50% of this puzzle is this honorable body. And these officers need it. I encourage you to ask them. I encourage you to call them and check in on them and say, how's the connectivity in your cruiser? Does it ever go down? What about if your computer breaks in the report room? How quick is that fixed? All right. There's productivity. When Bill Lennox and Dan are in here fixing our computers, where are they not? City Hall, library, wastewater, DPW, right? We all have computers. We all have software. All right. If we're going to spend money on servers and softwares and updates, and we're just gonna let the money go. We're gonna buy it and not repair it, fix it, maintain it. We have a full-time mechanic that maintains our fleet. There's a reason for that. We need a full-time IT guy, or part-time for now, to maintain these computers. This is our lifeline. We just bought 15 new computers. Are we just going to install them and let them go?
Yeah, the internet and radio is just as important to a police officer or firefighter as a gun. I'm going to recognize Council Blair, then Mr. Conti. Mr. Blair has been waiting patiently for a moment. Peter.
Yes, Jay. Chief, I want to applaud you for being so vocal about this. I know we've had this discussion in the past, and I know how important it is to you. And if we can't supply those amenities to our police officers that they desperately need, we're in serious trouble. This is definitely a safety factor, and
yes, it is.
Where the mayor is giving up salary for projects coordinator or whatever title was that's left, and you stepped up to the plate. Unbelievable, saying that if there is a shortfall, you'll hold back on one of your hires.
Council, that's how important it is to me. Do we need that police officer? Absolutely. But what good is that police officer if we can't do our job? It's going to take a full year to train him, to get him up. He'll be useful in FY22. And FY21, it's going to take a full year to get him trained. So I'll bite the bullet. If I got to come in myself and cover shifts, I'll do that in order to support this position.
Well,
I encourage you to contact Detective Golden. He's a subject matter expert. He can tell you about the service, what needs to be done, how important it is, how frustrating it is for him trying to accomplish his mission.
I will definitely give you a call probably tomorrow and see if you can set up some time with me so I better understand it. But as many times as we've been over this particular position, I mean, I'm on board with it completely because it's for the safety of your officers and it's for the safety of our public. Now, you brought up a missing child, a person with dementia that's out walking. If this stuff goes down, you can't do your job. If you can't do your job, you can't protect the people of Attleboro. So,
right. The CAD system, the lifeline of the officers out there that capture all the information, that communicate back and forth, that stack the calls, dispatch the calls. It went down twice last week. I had to call Bill Lennox Saturday and Sunday. He had to come in and fix it. I mean, it's not fun for him either. But he puts a lot of man hours in, and he does not complain. He does not complain. He, lack of a better phrase, he sucks it up. But you know what? When he retires, we're not going to find a guy like Bill Lennox. We're not going to find a guy like Bill Lennox. Bill Lennox, we use more from Bill Lennox than what we're paying him. That man is stretched to the point where, thank God, he's mellow and doesn't have high blood pressure. And I tell you what, his wife's a saint. You know how many times I wake him up in the middle of the night telling him about service going down and what have you? So.
Yeah, Bill's often the first person at City Hall and the last one to leave.
Sometimes you come in on the weekend, you see his car there.
Yeah.
So, Chief, you have my complete support, and I know
Thank you, sir.
I knew you were expecting it, and you got it. But I just want to add one thing about technology. You know, I'm not a police officer, I'm an assessor. But my job is all database and it's all computer, 100%. And I've got a crackerjack IT department in Taunton, and it makes my life pleasant. You know, it is the difference between being upset and frustrated in your workplace with getting tremendous amount of work done because you're so efficient
Well
and
said.
capable.
Well said.
So I'm behind you 100%, and I appreciate you giving Bill Lennox the kudos because I'm behind him 100%. You know, I would love to see him get more staff and more funds to make City Hall Wi-Fi and protected. And there's so much that can be done that we cannot do. And this pandemic, you know, it's a problem. But the IT, pandemic or not, in the door he goes. And that concludes my comments.
And Council, can I just
Right
add?
on
I'm sorry.
the- no.
This will also help other departments. The less Bill Lennox and Dan are in our building, other departments throughout the city are going to enjoy productivity gains because now they're not waiting. And, you know, I know sometimes he puts us at a priority over other departments because the urgency that we operate in. And I apologize to those other departments.
No, I think one thing I'll say, and I want to move on, is in one of my old companies years ago, they said you can't spell priority without IT. So,
True.
you know. So Chief, couple things that I want to ask is I want to talk, and this could be more for Jeremy. I'm looking at the $50,000 for a new cruiser, and this is a little bit of a different way of doing it, especially the way we've done it in the years past. And obviously, if we could talk a little bit about if this is a change in policy and how we're going to be acquiring the cruisers going forward. And I know, Chief, this is something you and I have talked ad nauseum about, and about how for years now you've had a perfect rotation of being able to get the cruisers. It's usually seven at a time.
Yeah, if you want me to talk, or
Yeah.
okay. We usually bond for cruisers 7 years. So this has been a, I don't know, about 10 years now, Deb, 11 years, the process with the problem with the 2601 account with the court, the funds being.
It's been a long time. I didn't look back to see, Chief, but it's probably been at least a decade.
Yeah, it's seems like yesterday, but, and Deb, you still look very young.
Well, thank you.
Okay. So
I can't get you any money, Chief.
nevertheless, but I tried. So we used to enjoy generating a lot more revenue in the 2601 account.
Yeah.
As they say in South Boston, those days are OBA over. The state did an audit and said, hey, all those funds that you're capturing from court costs and fees and what have you is supposed to go into the state general fund, not to the local departments in the area. So overnight we lost of the revenue generated. The other 50% came from traffic citations. All right, and those traffic citations are down also. The trend line is down. Therefore, Mayor Dumas challenged me to find out. All right, hey, you need more cruises? I don't have it within the budget. I can't take from the library and the wastewater, or what? Well, not wastewater, that's an enterprise account, but you know what I mean, DPW. Can you generate some funds? I said, I'll try. So I came up with the idea of the tow contract, and right out of the chute, we generated $100,000. We now generate over $155,000. To purchase a cruiser is approximately $50,000. That's buying the cruiser and outfitting with the necessary equipment. So I asked the mayor, I said, okay, we're bonding for 7 cruises and paying them off in 3 years, and using the tow contract in a roundabout way to pay down that debt. Why don't we do this? Why don't we keep the money generated from the tow contract, buy 3 cruises every year, $50,000 a piece, and at the end of 3 years, we'll have 9 cruises instead of 7. I said, then it will help build up the 2601 account to maintain the cruisers in existence, because not only do we got to purchase, we got to maintain them. And we also have to pay, God, forbid there's an accident, we got to pay the insurance premium every time that cruiser, there's an accident. That comes out of 2601. It doesn't come out of the, it comes out of the revolving fund. It doesn't come out of the city budget. So we're not only paying for the cruiser maintenance, we're also paying for the insurance costs if there's a cruiser accident. So he said, well, we got some debt. We can't really do it this year. And he had the idea of phasing it in. So this year he wanted to put $50,000 on the operating budget. Next year go 2, and the third year go 3. And by the end of the third year, that debt would be paid off, and we, the police department, would be basically funding our own cruises. So we would buy 3 cruises a year, and hopefully the money from the tow contract and the ticket money generating, we could hopefully purchase, arguably 4 to 5 cruises. 7 cruises a year is optimal, but I understand beggars can't be choosers. I get it,
Sure.
right? And that is the idea. That's why you see the 50 in there. Next year will be 100. The year after will be 150, hopefully 155. That will represent the tow contract, and then we'll be self-sufficient. However, there's got to be a transition phase from paying off the debt from the short-term borrowing and transitioning to the tow contract generating the funds. He said he just couldn't shift all the funds there, and maybe Jeremy and Deb could speak to that. I'm not up on the debt right now. I know each year debt comes off, but if you guys want to speak to that.
Yeah, you hit most everything there, Chief. Yeah, it's definitely a phased approach, as lockstep as we can with the debt phasing out, and also, as you all know, looking at this budget, and every department has going to tell you, there wasn't an additional $100,000 to put on that line to make it 3 cruisers this year. So we're doing it as a phased approach to get to the desired number of new cruisers each year. So yeah, I don't have much to add above and beyond the chief. He pretty much got it.
All right. It's appreciate it, Chief. I know how you do, how you've been doing this. I want to take a couple more before we take questions. I just want to open it up to Chief, see if there's anything else that you want to add, anything that you want to point out.
I want to point out in the most of the budget's level funded. There's one account that I absolutely critically needed to increase, and that was the professional services account. Even though we had to transfer some funds in there from retirements to pay for the assessment, the civil service assessment. That's on each city and town to fund that. What's the word Frank Cook always hated?
Unfunded mandate.
Unfunded mandates. That's like an unfunded mandate. Now we pay for it. So that's a cost that's thrown upon the cities and towns throughout the Commonwealth, the gift that keeps giving. So I need to conduct an audit of the evidence room and property room. It's not funded in the budget right now. It's vitally important. We did have an issue approximately 10, 11 years ago in our evidence room. We put policies in place to make sure that never happened again. This is the final element or variable that needs to be in place. Other departments recently have had issues. I want to make sure Attleboro never has an issue. I want to be ahead of the curveball, if you will. So that's why that account went up to fund that very, very important audit for the evidence room and property room that should be done annually. And it should absolutely not be done by a person or a staff member from the department. It should be a neutral, detached person, professional to come in to conduct that audit and to report back to us what we're meeting and where we need to improve from.
Sure.
Chief, what account are you referring to, please?
Professional services.
30101 only has 16,000.
So if I can make a point, you have to, I was going to try to clarify this for the counselors. The original budget for fiscal 20 for that. If you look at the year-to-date budget report, was 6,000, and then the requested 21 is 16,000. So original to original, it's up 10,000. The transfer in of the 38,000 was for the to repair after the lightning strike. So if you're looking at the revised 20 budget, it actually looks like less money, but if you're looking at the original 20 budget, it's $10,000 more.
Okay.
All right. Todd, did you still have a question?
In the wrong account.
Yeah, so I was going to mention that there's only 16,000 in the professional services. But the other thing, if we can hop back to the tow contract again, is this something that help me out with this a little bit? Were we using the tow contract before to pay for cruisers, and now we're not, or
Well,
what's going on? How is that working?
well, any revenue generated goes into the general fund. All right.
Mm-hmm.
However, Mayor Dumas and I guess it was like a gentleman's agreement, knowing that, okay, this money's coming in, we know what's coming in, it's going to hit, but we also got to pay the debt down. So we'll use, in theory, this money to pay the debt down. So the short-term borrowing, I think we're on our third or fourth cycle on this for short-term borrowing, whatever. Deb?
So I want to point out, because you've referred to the short-term borrowing a couple of times. There was a request that was sent down on May 19th, I believe, to bond for 7 cruisers. So that, I think the public hearing on that should be coming up. I think that's in committee. But I think it's important for the council to know that as part of the phase-in and part of the process, it was my recollection of the meeting that we had, Chief, that part of the difficulty also is the lead time to get cruises. The difficulty, there was some lead time difficulty in our meeting in January and February that we had the meetings. I think that's only going to be compounded by some Ford places closing and that kind of stuff. So the bond authorization, the details of what will actually be borrowed in the future would be worked out. I'm not sure how much of the authorization will actually be borrowed in the future, how much of it would be paid down. That remains to be seen. But there is a matter that sort of goes along with this that's before the council. So if you're hearing tonight about there's a transitional $50,000 in the budget, and at some point we're going to be buying cruises, and there's debt that's going to be on the books, that still needs to be at least mentioned. And the 150,000-ish, it's 153 this year with an annual escalation, is part of the local receipts, Councilor Kobus. The tow contract has been part of the local receipts and used to fund the budget, which in part would pay for the debt associated with the acquisition of cruises. So.
We haven't replaced a cruiser in over a year. And what the city auditor duly noted was there's a lag time. I asked the mayor for 9 cruises. He short-term borrowed for 7. I asked for 9 because anticipating that we may not get the cruises for another year. So that will be 2 years before we replace a cruiser.
And how long do cruisers stay on the road?
100,000 miles, usually 100. We don't. The pursuit rated 100,000 miles. We do not like cruises out on the road for over 100,000 miles. Ford even does not recommend they be driven over 100,000 miles. They're not pursuit rated. The cruisers take a beating, wear, tear, or if they become unsafe. So the reason why you got 1 in the budget, 7, because these cruises we order in July won't come to FY22. We've ordered a cruiser last June from a cruiser accident. It's a replacement cruiser. We still haven't got it because of Ford, in their infinite wisdom, changed the model of the Interceptor. And in doing so, they closed one plant to transition that plant, and then they were going to close the other plant and transition when that one came online. Then COVID happened, and on top of that, MHQ, the distributor up in Marlboro, who does 90% of the builds throughout Massachusetts for all municipal vehicles, is approximately 6 or 7 months behind. Once the vehicle gets on the lot, it takes 6 or 7 months to get it in the queue in order to build your vehicle. So you're looking about 1.5 years now to get vehicles in there, and they come dribs and drabs. They don't come 7 at a whack. We may get one. A month later we may get 3. One may come in a month later. So it's problematic. In the meantime,
once we receive it, how many years does it take to go 100?
Usually 3.
Okay.
We try to keep a cruiser down at least 8 hours a day. If it's driven 24 hours, you may get a year out of it. If it's driven 24 hours. So we try not to deploy the car for, at a minimum, more than 16 hours that day. We try to keep it down at least 8 hours. That's why when you go by the parking lot, you see a row of cruisers that aren't being utilized. Those are the cruisers that are at rest. We try to stretch it out. Otherwise, I would be requesting every single year over $1 million to replace the fleet of the cruisers that we operating at, 24 hours a day. Is 21 line cars, 7 times 3 is 21.
Chief, thank you very much. So everyone, if we have any additional questions for Chief, please send them to me through Virginia, and we'll be able to get it. Chief, want to thank you for taking the time. And as you alluded to earlier, this is a little bit of a different situation, just given the COVID and where we're at. But thank you for your explanations. Thank you as always for being prepared and knowing, what you have where and being able to be flexible when needed. So we appreciate it. And thank you and your department for everything you do on a daily basis.
Well, I just want to thank this honorable body for supporting the men and women of this police department. They're the bread and butter. I'm just steering the ship. They make it go. So your support for them means the world to us and especially to me. So thank you.
Have a good night, Chief. Thanks again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Jay, just so you know, I joined about 20 minutes ago.
I saw you pop on. That's the beauty of Zoom. You can't sneak in, Coop.
That's it. Thanks.
All right, thanks. Tom Hayes, wastewater superintendent, is with us now. So, Tom, the way we're going to do this is the same way we've done in the past, where we'll open the floor up to you, talk about what's important to you in your budget, and then we'll open it up to questions.
All right. Good evening. Can you hear me all right?
Can hear you fine.
All right. Basically, the fiscal 21 budget, we tried to level fund as best as possible. It's kind of hard with inflation since we never really adjust our rate for inflation. So we did make a lot of cuts. Hopefully they're not going to hurt us later on in the year. There was some big cuts we made. We originally were asking for a capital improvement line in the budget for upgrades in maintenance required to the collection system. We need to start a program. It's a 100-year-old system. It's really not had much of a facelift in the last 100 years. Just, here and there, we basically put out fires and that's it. That was a large cut that we allowed to be taken out of the budget to try to level fund. So I'm hoping that there'll be money in the fall to move ahead with this project. Other than that, we really haven't asked for anything more than what was required. We kept the chemical, which is always the biggest line in our budget. We kept the chemicals to within a few $1,000s of what we've calculated for next year. And it's really hard to predict something a year out, how things are going to run. We just have to go back on past history and hope that we got it right. Other than that, we're not asking for any extravagant prices, any upgrades, anything. We're just basically trying to stay level with fiscal 20.
And I apologize, Tom, I had to step away for a moment. Have you talked about the rate increase?
No, there is a proposed rate increase. We have a split rate. We have the residential rate. That's also the commercial rate. And we have an industrial rate, which affects only categorical and significant industrial users in the pretreatment program. We're looking at a 50-cent rate increase to help balance the budget. And also, like I said, we don't keep up with inflation. We don't get a bump every year. Our rate has been the same rate since 2016. Prices have gone up. Everybody knows that. Cost of living has gone up, but we haven't increased our rate. And what we have to pay for services, supplies, personnel costs, they all continue to go up and the rate stays the same. The plant's getting older. It was built in 1978. It's over 40 years old. It's never shut down. And it's, you know, getting a lot more costly. And every year we run it, it's going to get more costly to keep this plant running. This equipment is in harsh conditions all day long, and it's catching up with us. You know, there's a lot of things that really need serious attention. They're going to cost a lot of money, and that's coming down the road shortly. This plant is really should be looked at for an upgrade probably within the next 5 years. It's going to be a major one. We're just waiting for the permit to drop from the EPA so we know what to design for. But we're going to have to, you know, looking ahead, we're going to have a lot of money that needs to be put into this facility. So we're doing our best to keep it together right now with the limited funds we have, and it's getting harder and harder every year. So hopefully, if this rate is approved, it'll allow us to keep the plant running and in permit until we can, you know, figure out what needs to be done, because eventually we're going to have to rebuild the facility again.
All right, I have a few questions, but before I get to mine, I want to open it up to my committee, see if you had anything for Tom. Councilor Conti, then Kobus.
So Tom, I just want to get a better understanding of one of your particular rate increases. You say in your letter of May 21st, there's currently 22 permitted users in the industrial program. The fees get renewed every 5 years. What you would collect this year is $42,400, and what you will collect in fiscal year 21 is $180,000. So if we got 22 accounts, the average is let's say $2,000. It's going to jump to $9,000. Yikes! That is a huge increase.
We looked at that, and we actually costed out how much time is spent with the program enforcing that permit. Remember, that's over 5 years, so that's spread out over 5 years. That's a 5-year permit. That we get that fee it would be every 5 years. Next time we get that, we would get it again would be in
right. But these people don't even have an understanding that you're even thinking about increasing. So if I'm a small business, I'm an industrial account, and I'm used to paying $2,000 in sewer fees, and I know the permit's going to be renewed every 5 years, some kind of advance warning that I'm going to get a $9,000 bill instead of a $2,000 bill, it's got to soften the blow. And otherwise, you're going to drive some of these guys out.
Most of the industries we're talking about they're significant industrial or the categorical. So these are your manufacturing industries. They're somebody may be the industrial district in the city, but it doesn't mean they're in the pretreatment program. There's 86, I believe, industries in the industrial sector that's read as an industry. But of those, only these 22 are actually somebody that's in the pretreatment program.
Oh, Tom, would you do me a favor? Would you please go through the 22 accounts and pick out the smallest company and find what they paid 5 years ago and find what they're going to pay if this passes the council?
They paid $2,200 5 years ago.
They paid $2,200, and so this year they're going to pay $9,000.
No, there's 17 companies that are significant, that are categorical, that discharge. Theirs is 10,000. There's an additional 6 companies that are zero discharges, which means they're closed loop system, but we're still required to permit them, to have oversight on them, inspections and whatnot. They don't discharge, so their rate will be less. That's why there's actually a split rate. It's not one rate. It's not one $9,000 rate.
I'm just concerned about even though it's a 5-year permit, and I understand the world changes tremendously in 5 years. Got it. And you and I in the Capital Improvements Committee went through that plan last year or 2 years ago, and I saw the capital needs, and you and I talked about increasing the rate so that you could have a capital improvement fund in the enterprise system. And I support that 100%. But I have a hair rising on the back of my neck when I see the revenues going from 42,000 to 180,000 on 22 accounts, because their bills are going to go up through the roof. So how can you calm me down, Tom? You know?
Well, I mean, it is a one-time. They're not going to get billed again for another 5 years. What happens is the industrial pretreatment staff that oversee these permittees, they're being funded by the ratepayer the rest of the time, because the way the program's set up with the EPA is the program's supposed to be self-funding. It's supposed to pay all their costs, their salaries. It never comes close. So for the rest of the time, the ratepayers are paying the salary because these staff still have to be here. We still have to enforce the program. I mean, it's federally required, and they're working, 5 days a week, and basically they're living off of that $2,200 for 5 years from that industry. And so obviously that's not covering, with anything. Basically, that's not going to cover the cost of gas for their vehicles. So the ratepayer is picking up the tab for all the industries now.
So in other communities, will the new fee structure match their fee structure?
Some communities, yes. We're still much lower. There's communities out here that will actually charge you much higher fees. Then they'll back charge you on the amount of water at the end of the year. And we have people in surrounding communities that are pushing 6 figures a year for permits.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, thank you for the line of questioning. I think it's important. Councilor Corbis.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Delicio. So my question is, looking at the rate increase, we're going for residential from $9.10 to a 50-cent increase to $9.60, which equates to roughly 5.5%, which is better than the 11% increase that's being requested on the water side. I have a couple questions about that. Is, first of all, how'd you come up with the 50% number? What went into figuring that out? And the second question is, what have you seen for usage since COVID-19 and all of that? I know on the water side, we've seen a decrease in water usage. Have you seen something similar on the sewage side? And by the way, I appreciate that the percentage increase is lower and more aligned with what I've heard from other communities in the state that they're increasing their rates at.
On the first question, I think Jeremy probably would have a better answer for you.
Yeah, I'll take the first question, and then Tom, you could talk about usage. So in a similar vein to how we looked at the Water Enterprise Fund, we took the 75-25 split that we talked about yesterday, with usage that's being billed after July 1 would be billed at the prior to July 1 rate. So the issue that President Cooper had brought up before, we approached wastewater the same way. And then we took what rate would stabilize the fund, what rate would present a balanced budget if implemented throughout the whole year, and then use retained earnings to fill the hole for the billing that kind of lags that. So you can see the retained earnings that are being used here are $305,000. If we had the full rate for the full year, that would be a much lower number and much closer to balance. Use some retained earnings, but not nearly that level. So we got to that number by saying, what's a full rate, a new rate for a full year, get us to balance? What is that? And then I had sent some stuff through Virginia this afternoon. I'm not sure if you all received it, but it shows the rate increase history from wastewater. The last one was voted on in the spring of 2013 for fiscal 2014. That was a 45-cent increase. So yeah, it has been quite some time. And like Tom said, chemicals go up every year, costs salaries go up every year, everything goes up every year. So the purchasing power of this rate has been kind of eaten away at over the last 7 fiscal years.
Tom, before you go on, if I could interject for 1 second. So I've heard from a couple of residents who watched last night, and one thing they said is, can we talk more about what the rate is? And we talked about this with Courtney last night. They don't want to hear it's, we're raising the rate because we haven't in 5 or 6 years. So I appreciate, Jeremy, where you're coming at with the whole concept of talking about the purchasing power. I think that's going to resonate more with people. What I'm hearing is they're okay with the rate as long as, one, they see what the rate, if they can see the tangibility of what that rate increase is going to go for. So that purchasing power is a really great spot. So Tom, I'm going to ask the same thing that we asked to Courtney. If you could just kind of get us an overview of what that rate, how the rate breaks down, and really where it goes down to.
Basically, on a residential, you're looking at an average residential bill. Over the course of the year, it'll be $37.65 more they'll be paying over the year. A commercial user, which may be, supermarket, restaurant, whatnot, they would be paying an additional $126.84 over the year. Looking at industries, and industries can vary greatly. We have some industries that are going to be, giving us flows in the 6 figures a day, and we have industries that are very small. But on an average bill, they're looking at about $1,066 a year increase in their overall cost for sewerage.
Okay. And then again, just if we could, I'll recognize Deb in 17 to 24 seconds, but if we could just get, I think the ratepayers from whom I'm talking to want to understand more what that money goes to. Is it purchasing what's the chemicals? I think
it's gonna go to balance the budget, and we need to start looking at, we've been hitting our retained earnings, and we need retained earnings in these departments. These are very expensive departments to run, and one break can cost you, $500,000 to repair or more if something goes down. And that's what our retained earnings do. They allow us to go in and make emergency repairs to keep these departments running and to keep meeting permit. And the more we dip into it, the less we can do, the less projects we can do in-house. And then we end up eventually, if things have to be fixed, then we start going out the bond and paying interest on this money. We have a lot of big projects that are going to be coming down the road, and we really don't have the retained earnings now to do this without going to bond on a lot of these now. The money's not there just to say we'll take it from retained, because we're trying to stabilize the budget with it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. And that's really what we were looking for. So I appreciate that. So we know a lot of what you're talking about. I mean, this is what we do. A lot of people who are looking and they're just hearing that they're going to have a rate, they don't understand what that means. So thank you. Deb, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't know if it helps put things in perspective or not. And again, it's not popular because we're talking about a rate increase, but I think we all understand, and I think the public has heard a number of times that your tax bills go up by 2.5% every year. Everybody's familiar with Proposition 2.5, but that happens in the general government side, but it doesn't happen in the water and wastewater rate side. So if there was the corresponding 2.5% increase on the rate every year, we wouldn't necessarily have like these big jumps that we have every 5 years. I think it's been, you said 2014. I don't know, just from the layman perspective of that's something that's familiar to folks, because we all know that other costs escalate. This year, the budget, the water budget, wastewater budget, general government budget, school budget, one of the really big things that we had significant savings on is that the health insurance cost for the city, the premium is level funded from last year. We didn't go up, we didn't have to, and that's huge. So, in a year that alone has to increase, you'd be looking at significantly more money that we'd need throughout the entire budget. So those are sort of the costs that people can easily understand, that all costs over the last 5 years, everything has escalated a little bit, right? There might have been a step increase for people. There isn't a cost of living increase this year in the proposed budgets. The health insurance has been held harmless, but the retirement pension cost has gone up. So that right there is a little bit more. Chemical costs a little bit more. and there isn't the annual escalation of the rate that goes on with those costs. So every year, providing the same level of service at the same rate means that it's dipping into something. So I don't know if that helps explain it a little bit to the people watching. I know all of you sort of get it already.
If I can add a point to that.
Great, Deb. And again, I'm just stressing the feedback that I'm hearing from residents. Believe me, they're watching this. They want to really understand, especially in these times, what's in it for me, how does it impact me? Jeremy, did you have a question?
Just wanted to make one point on the 2.5% increase every year that you see on your local tax bills. If we look at the rate in 2010 for wastewater residential, it was $8.65. If that had increased 2.5% every year until today, the rate would be at $11.35. And we're looking to go to $9.60. So it's even, if we had kept up with that 2.5, we would, what we're asking for as an increase is below what that inflationary pressure growth would have dictated.
Terrific, thank you. President Cooper, you're muted.
So Jeremy, thank you for sending this packet today. I just want to make sure that I'm reading this first page right. So wastewater retained earnings after the 310,000 out is 910,000. Is that right?
Yes, that's before being certified. That's after the $305,000 out to balance the budget. So that's what it would be at the close of the fiscal year before it's certified in the fall with any surplus from the current fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
I believe I still owe an answer to Mr. Kobus.
Thank you.
Okay, flow changes during COVID-19. Unlike water, where basically you meter water into your house, it's assumed you use it. We have a lot of sources of flow that come to us, especially that time of year, because of the I&I situation the city has, because as I stated earlier, the collection system is 100 years old and it needs a lot of work. So we tend not to see changes, subtle changes. We have 2.25 average million gallons a day of inflow and infiltration from groundwater and surface runoff because the system is in dire need of a lot of work. So we never saw it that this happened in the spring, which is our rainy season, which we always have a lot of flow anyways from I&I. So we never would have been able to really say that COVID caused the difference. Whatever comes into the plant, we have to treat no matter what. So we're treating rainwater too, which we're not supposed to, but we have no choice until we tighten up the collection system.
But that all makes sense. Thank you.
President Cooper, did I see a hand go up? I just realized my camera's off.
I mean, I just wanted to comment one small thing in that the 910,000 in retained earnings is 25% of what the city has in retained earnings at $4.5 million. So I'm just struggling with all these rate increases without any. If you told me you had big capital projects or something that you needed to do, I guess I'd feel better. But I'm hesitating because my hesitation is around the fact that you're at about 20 to 25% of what the city has in stabilization. So I'm just struggling with the whole thing.
Yeah, like I had mentioned earlier, we did a sewer survey evaluation. It was required by EPA and DEP back in 2017. We didn't for the I&I problem the city has. And what came out of it was we need to do a very large basin survey. We don't know where the I&I, the biggest concentration of it's coming from. We need to pinpoint it, then we need to narrow it down, then we need to go in and start the construction phase. And this is, once it starts, this is something that will be ongoing until the entire 160 miles of collection system in the city has been revamped. Right now, we're giving up over 2 million gallons a day in capacity, and we're treating over 2 million gallons a day of rainwater in runoff. So the study was supposed to be conducted. We told DEP and EPA we would be doing it in, I believe, 2018. It got put off because couldn't afford it. 2019, it got put off again. It was put off in 2020. I've had phone calls from DEP wanting to know, when is this going to happen? And I told them that we are putting a line in the budget. It was a $250,000 line for capital improvements that was going to start the I&I program this year. Because of budget problems, we had to remove that from the budget. So now the money's not there. It's my intention to go to council in the fall and ask for the money and retained earnings to do the first phase of this study. Once it's done, then this is going to be every year. And this is going to be something that basically goes on and on. I can't tell you how long it's going to take to do the entire city. You've got 100 years worth of not doing this, let's put it that way. So we're starting now. And with the reduced capacity, what's going to happen is once we get up to 90% of our design capacity, basically we're going to be told by EPA, time to build a new treatment plant and a bigger one because you are now at 90% capacity. So, you know, wet weather, we're getting there. So we have to be careful. And also other communities have had moratoriums put on building because they've reached so much I&I. DEP stepped in and DEP says you're not issuing any more sewer extensions. You cannot build any more in your community until you fix your I&I. We don't want that to happen either. So, I mean, there's a lot of programs like this coming. The facility itself is going to have to be totally revamped. We did the original plant in 78, went online in 1980. We did equipment replacement in the early 2000s. Now that's going on 16 years now. Every 20 years, you're basically rebuilding your treatment plant. The permits come, a plant is doing things it was never designed to do. I can tell you right now, I've seen drafts of a new permit. We're never going to be able to meet it. There's no way we're going to be able to meet it. And I'll guarantee you EPA and DEP know we can't meet it with this existing design. So we're going to have to design a plant that can meet it. And right now, we're just waiting for the permit to drop. They're doing the larger basins. And once they're done, they'll get to us. I put the renewal in for this permit back in 2013. We still haven't received it yet. They're kind of slow. So that's in the pipeline. And that's going to be a huge capital project. And that's going to be a lot of money. You know, we're talking a huge, huge dollar figure here. And there's a lot of big things coming down the pipe to keep us in compliance and to keep this plant running.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah, Tom, I appreciate that explanation as well. I had a similar question, but I think you adequately answered it. Thank you. You talk about the price of chemicals going up, and when you look at your budget, chemicals recommended is $50,000 less than the requested amount. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, what we did was we always cold call all of our vendors in February because we people don't realize, but we start our budget in January. We start working on it for the next fiscal year. We start calling all of our vendors and we say, hey, we're not going to hold your feet to the fire, but give us an idea. What can we expect next year for the prices? And they'll come back and they'll say, based on current market, expect it to stay the same or go up a certain percentage. Everybody came back with the exception of one or two of increases in chemicals. Then we projected usage for the next year based on 5 years worth of history at the new price. Then COVID hit. Everything ground to a halt. Purchasing agent Carol Brown did a great job reaching out to the vendors, trying to get them to renew. They all renewed because I think they didn't want to go through the hassle of bidding, to be honest with you, with everything that's going on. So we held the price. There was only a few small chemicals that are proprietary chemicals that we use that are small dollar amounts in our budget that they have to go up, but they haven't gone up in years. So we got lucky. So I was able to recalculate with the current figures and I was able to reduce $50,000. My number is $247,000 and change. Like I said, I cut it really close at, I'm sorry, not 200, $947,000 and change. So I cut it really close at $950,000. Okay. And that's if we can run like we did this year and the previous 4 years, and things change all the time.
Right. And a lot of what you do is federally and state mandated. So, those numbers could change at any time.
Once the permit drops, yeah, and it's going to be much stricter. And like I said, I've been waiting for the permit to drop since 2013 when I sent in a renewal. So last word I had from DEP was they're doing the large basins first, and I'll move on to the medium basins, which is Attleboro.
All right, Tom, thank you. That's all the questions I had. I don't know if anyone has anything else, and I will just also give a little disclosure where we just got the budget Tuesday night and we're going through it. There could be some follow-up, Tom, if that's, you know, just to be aware, we might be, we might ask you to come back or send you an email.
Okay, no problem.
Cool. Does anyone have anything else for Superintendent Hayes? All right, Tom, thanks very much for coming down.
All right, thanks.
Good night.
Good night.
All right. And we are now joined by Superintendent David Sawyer and Mark Furtado from the Attleboro Public Schools. We're going to be doing this the same. We've done it over the last several years now. Kind of walk us through the highlights of your budget, things you think we need to be aware of, and then we'll open it up to the council for questions. So, Superintendent Sawyer, good evening.
Thank you very much. I just have a few brief remarks before I hand it over to Mr. Furtado, who is prepared to get into a greater level of detail. But at the highest level, the budget as proposed does meet the school's needs to meet a level service. We were a little bit disappointed on how the Student Opportunity Act worked out for Attleboro. In fact, of the numbers are escaping me now, but 30-something communities that were making out as a result of that legislation. We were one of only 3 in the state that didn't actually make enough money to need to be able to explain to the state how we were going to spend it. So that didn't deliver in this year in the way that we had hoped. But the good news is that it did help a little bit, and that a little bit made the difference in terms of the number that we are currently using being something that we can meet the needs of the district. Of course, it's all predicated on Chapter 70 and that number not changing. We have no idea what we can expect from the state in the budget on what Chapter 70 is going to be. So we are proceeding with caution, knowing that when the state figures out its budget, we might be facing a very different situation than the one that we're here to discuss tonight. But the good news is that, in working with the city closely, we are confident that the city will be able to do its part, and that really, our fates are in the hands of the state at this point. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mark to maybe provide a little bit more detail to that overview.
Sure, probably, Mark, if you could give me one quick second before you go on. I should have looked at this, and I'm remiss that I didn't. I think it's appropriate to take a second to recognize the difficult school year that 2020 proved to be with the pandemic. Of course, across the country, across the globe, but specifically here in Attleboro. The teachers, the administrators, your staff have really done an amazing job to go above and beyond in a situation that I don't think anyone ever could have thought that they would be in. So, of course, I'm speaking as the father of an 8th grader at Coelho who lost that last 3 months in that transition going to the high school. But based on what I've been helping him with the remote and distance learning, I think that he's going to be set up pretty well. So thank you to all the teachers out there. We do appreciate everything that you had to go through this year. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't make that point.
I appreciate that very much. Attleboro, as we talk about all the time, is very lucky to have a very dedicated staff who have, been struggling through difficult times to make this all work. And I have to say that families have just been wonderful in being patient and understanding and working with us and trying to, everyone's doing their part to make it work. And I know that we have weathered this better than many other communities.
Sorry about that, Mark. It's all yours, sir.
No problem. First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I want to echo the superintendent's statement that that on a level service basis, we can make the budget given to us by the city work, given that the state aid is what it was in January. In terms of highlights, obviously we don't have any new spending. We've had to accommodate some budget deficits in our healthcare lines, as well as some anticipated increases. I'm sure the council's aware that folks, a bunch of folks have lost their jobs. We expect our staff to have a big migration to healthcare because of that. We've had some increases with sped tuitions and have accommodated that in the budget. We have, have not increased spending on any new programs in the budget as it's currently configured. I also pointed out spending at the school level is up at a rate of 2.8%. I think that's a solid reflection of what we've done with our labor unions and trying to wage scales that are consistent with our 2.5% goal for increases in funding.
So Mark, if I could just ask a couple questions. Can you just give a quick overview of what is net school spending and what is non-net school spending, just so people have an understanding?
Sure. For us specifically, non-net school spending would be transportation dollars, and I believe capital expenditures are typically not categorized as net school spending. Otherwise, all of our operational costs outside of transportation are net school spending dollars.
So then, can we talk a little bit about the transportation? And, I know with schools not being in session since March, are we going to see any semblance of funds being returned from fiscal year 20?
Yep. So for fiscal year 20 right now, I don't want to take up too much of your time, but we were directed by DESE to reach agreements with transportation service providers for the time that schools are not in session. Concern at the state level that some of these providers would go out of business because their business is capital and people, and they can lay off people, but they can't lay off their buses. So there was a concern about what the burden would be on these smaller companies, especially the mom and pop operations. And there was a way, given that the money was already budgeted, to provide some support for them while schools were closed down. We are getting we're tasked with negotiating with H&L Bloom, who is our primary service provider, as well as having another group negotiate with Vanpool, which is our primary special needs out of district provider, as well as our homeless provider. We've done that. With those negotiations completed and assuming that those obligations get paid, which there's still an issue with regard to state law, which stipulates that you cannot pay for services that you don't receive. So if we assume that those negotiated payments are made, we would still be returning something around $600,000 to the city. If those negotiated payments are not made, that number turns closer to $1 million. In addition to that, we are out of our revolving fund going to be either refunding fee-for-service fees to our parents who missed essentially 60 days of transportation but paid them. So in the case of, say, seniors who aren't coming back, those families will get a refund. Families who left the district prior to becoming a senior at Attleboro High School, they would be getting a refund. And we're also offering the option of having the first 60 days of the new year starting in September, basically give them credit for that, which substantially reduce their fee service expense for the entire school year.
And, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So then for fiscal 21, do you think that your transportation figure is reasonable? Do you expect that you may have to come in front of the council again asking for more?
No, I would say based on everything I've heard, and none of that is sort of etched in stone. But when people start pondering about how to come back to school, I was saying to someone earlier today, we don't have a a configuration issue. We can't go into our buildings, rearrange the chairs, and say, "There we go, we're all set."
Right.
We have physics here. We have large class sizes. There isn't going to be a way to accommodate a class if the current conditions, social distancing, et cetera, are a requirement. Given that physics problem, our solution would be to have a portion of the class come on a given day. So, or shifts in the course of a day, or that kind of physics problem in the classroom relieves the transportation concern that, holy cow, we're going to have to double our buses. We'll have half classrooms, half buses, and both of those will adhere to the distancing requirements should they continue through September. We wouldn't increase the fleet. We would decrease the presence at the schools in the course of a week that would be able to be accommodated as we're currently configured.
Sure, and that makes sense to me because with my role at the RMV, we do something similar with our shifts. Half the shifts work in one day, half the shifts work in the other day. That being said, as you're decreasing the number of people inside the building, is it fair to assume that the other half would be remote learning?
I believe that would be the expectation. I don't think anybody has an interest in students not learning.
I just wanted to ensure.
Yeah.
So in this current state, I'm assuming that the need for utilities has been much less. Have you seen any cost savings, or is it all contractual in terms of what we pay for rubbish removal, what we pay for heat and lighting, power and lighting?
Yeah, if this had happened, say, in November, and we went through the winter, keeping the buildings at their minimum temperatures, we would probably see some numbers.
Sure.
Unfortunately, it happened in March, right as we were starting to, basically turn off the heat and convert the buildings anyway. So on the heating front, there's nothing to really speak about there. There's going to be some savings on the electricity side. We're thinking $50,000 maybe. So on $1 million, it's not stupendous, but we are going to have a surplus there.
Okay, great. Well, that's all I have. I'll open it up to my committee. Councilor Corbis, I saw your hand.
Yes. Thank you, Councilor Delissio. A couple questions. Actually, you answered the big one about the busing and how that would work if we needed to maintain social distancing or we were doing double sessions. And so thank you for that one, first off. The other two questions, one was regarding the Special Education Stabilization Fund. I was wondering, did we end up spending that money that was put in there from last year? And the second question is, so do we have a plan for if Chapter 70 funding doesn't come through the way we're expecting it? Overall, your budget, I think, is roughly $4 million above what it was for fiscal year 20. And so say the state comes back and is $2 million short from what we're expecting. Do you have you put together contingency plans for that? Are you planning for that potential?
Sure. Let me answer them in order. So
Sure.
In terms of stabilization, we did not use it. We are not going to need to use it. We're going to, finish the year on our own devices, and we have been communicating kind of that status with the city all along. We will have a surplus operationally, aside from the money identified coming back from transportation. There'll be additional funds I don't know exactly what it's going to be yet. Because our staff has been absent, we haven't been able to kind of, clean up our purchase orders and get a sense of what things are. But, if I had to throw a dart at the board, I'd say right now it'd be between $200,000 and $400,000 additional on the operational side. We don't have a plan for a multi-million-dollar cut. I don't know if such a thing exists, but if it does, I'll be happy to buy it. We would have to work very hard. I want to remind the committee, our what we call discretionary funds are funds that are not contractually obligated, less than 3% of our total budget. That's the pens, paper clips, that stuff. So we would be significantly challenged with a multi-million-dollar reduction in our funding. If it's and again, I don't want to sound flippant about this, but if it was $500,000, it would be a very tall task, but we would figure that out, I think. Going beyond that, we wouldn't be able to operate the way we're operating today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions from anyone on the council? Deb.
So a couple of things. Thank you, Mark. I think you touched on everything. I did want to mention part of the ineligible net school spending is the vans. And right. I think there's only because I know it's going to be coming up to the council quickly. Yep. A portion of the transportation offered by the school district is, for lack of a better term, in-house. We have a small fleet of vans and some personnel that are actually city employees. The lease on the vans is up. There's a new lease, I think, that's going to be, it went through the school committee already, yeah. Correct? Yeah. So that's gone through the school committee, and I think it's coming over to the legal side on the city to be vetted by the city solicitor, and then would be presented to the municipal council for the approval of the long-term lease, because all leases that extend beyond a fiscal year have to go to the council by ordinance. And that funding is already built into the fiscal 21 budget that is before the council, with the portion to cover the cost under the ineligible. The other piece of that would be, I think the lease to purchase option includes some surplusing of the existing fleet that would go, would be swapped out for the new fleet. So just to keep that in mind from the council perspective, that when you see that in likely not too distant future, that's something that would need to be addressed for the transportation of the school. All of the money that Mark just spoke about relative to transportation and or operational turnbacks and that kind of stuff, just for everybody's information, that would fall out to equity and become part of the fiscal 20 free cash certification, and hopefully available in the fall, so that if there were needs on the financial side that need to be offset, that would be an available resource and reserve of funds to do so. And then finally, as it relates to the school, just because I feel as though it's important to remind everybody at every opportunity, the high school, the new construction of the high school, the debt associated with the new construction of the high school, from the perspective of the council, will need to be revisited in the fall, likely in mid to late October, as we're setting the tax rate, because there is a plan to go back to market for the next tranche of borrowing associated with the high school that we were not able to do in April because of market conditions related to COVID and, just the overall market. So I just feel it's important to make sure I mention that at every opportunity I can. I realize this isn't a debt discussion, but it is the school. The high school is the biggest project that we've undertaken. I'm sure all of you and the public is pretty aware of it. If they go by Rathburn Willard, they can see all the progress that's being made. So just to drive that point home, the other impact of that as it relates to the taxpayer is, because we were unable to do the large borrowing in April, that large principal payment will not occur during the fiscal 21 budget. There will be the interest payment on the $15 million that was borrowed, as well as, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, but the interest payment on the first principal, right? And then would there be a 50%? There'll be a 50% payment. If we're able to borrow in October, there will be some debt associated with April. So we need to get it back in the budget in October and get it on the debt exclusion for the tax rate form. So I just don't want the council to be surprised by that when we do return for an appropriation to pay the debt associated with the high school that we need to go to market for in the fall, because that was not the original intention. It pushes off some of the requirement of what will hit the taxpayer's bill a little bit too. So that's the only good news relative to that. That's all I have, Jay.
All right, thanks, Deb. Do we have anything else for Superintendent Sawyer or Mr. Furtado? All right, well, gentlemen, thank you for coming out. And again, thank you to the teachers, the administration, and the staff.
Thank you to the council for your continued support.
Stay well, stay safe. With that being said, that really wraps up the business in front of the Budget and Appropriations Committee. We will be meeting again next Wednesday and Thursday nights. I think the agenda might change a little. I'm going to want to talk to Deb and Mark about a couple things, but we are meeting. It's a regular meeting Tuesday, Mark, going back to 7 o'clock, but we'll also still be via Zoom.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. Well, seeing that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 7:35. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.